Russian warships in the Mediterranean Sea have fired 4 cruise missiles at the Islamic State group and APO's positions in Syria, the Russian Defense Ministry said on Wednesday. The announcement came as Syrian government troops pushed ahead in their offensive against IS and militants in central and northern Syria. Moscow said in a statement that the Admiral Essen frigate and the Krasnodar submarine launched the missiles at its targets in the area of the ancient town of Palmyra. There was no information on when the missiles were launched. Syrian troops have been on the offensive for weeks in northern, central, and southern part of the country against IS and US-backed rebels under the cover of Russian airstrikes, gaining an area almost half the size of neighboring Lebanon. Most recently, Syrian troops and their allies have been marching toward the stronghold of Sukna, about 60 kilometers (37 miles) northeast of Palmyra. The strategic juncture in the Syrian desert aids government plans to go after is in Deir el-Zawar, one of the militants and APO's last major strongholds in Syria. The oil-rich province straddles the border with Iraq and is the extremist group and APO's last gateway to the outside world. Russia, a staunch Damascus ally, has been providing air cover to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad and APO's offensive on IS and other insurgents since 2015. Moscow had fired cruise missiles from warships in the past, as well as from mainland Russia against Assad and APO's opponents. As the fighting against IS militants is underway near Palmyra, Syrian troops clashed with US-backed rebels in the Country and APO's south on Wednesday, according to the Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights and Mazahim al-Salam of the activist-run Hammurabi Justice News network that tracks developments in eastern Syria. The fighting came days after the United States told Syrian government forces and their allies to move away from an area near the Jordanian border, where the coalition is training allied rebels. The warning comes less than 2 weeks after the Americans bombed Iranian-backed troops there, after they failed to heed similar warnings. Navy Captain Jeff Davis, a Pentagon spokesman, said on Tuesday that the U.S. dropped leaflets over the weekend telling the forces to leave the established protected zone. Syrian troops backed by Russian airstrikes captured Palmyra in March last year, and Moscow even flew in one of its best classical musicians to play a triumphant concert at Palmyra and APO's ancient theater. His forces, however, recaptured Palmyra 8 months later, before Syrian government troops drove them out again in March this year. RUSSIA and APO's defense ministry said its Wednesday statement that the strikes successfully hit IS heavy weapons and fighters whom the group had deployed and moved to Palmyra from the stronghold of Raqqa, the de facto capital of the Sunni militant group and its self-proclaimed caliphate. Moscow said it had notified the US, Turkish and Israeli militaries beforehand of the upcoming strike. It added that the Russian strike was promptly executed following the order, a testimony to the Navy and APO's high readiness and capabilities. Russia has been busy mediating between Assad and Turkey and the West, who seek his removal. Earlier this month, Russia, Iran, and Turkey agreed to establish safe zones in Syria, signing on to a Russian plan under which Assad and APO's air force would halt flights over designated areas across the war-torn country. Russia says maps delineating the zones should be ready by June 4.